This is Edge of the Box, a podcast brought to you by WhoScored.com.
Hello, welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com in association with BetVictor. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by Jonathan Wilson and WhoScored's Josh Wright, who's filling in for Martin yet again. How are we both?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you, Jonathan. Josh, you well?
Yep, also very good. Thank you very much.
Pleased to be back on.
Lovely to be back on. Celebrated my 28th birthday on Tuesday, so
28, absolutely no need.
New year.
Excellent. First podcast of your year 28 for you then, Josh. Let's make it a good one, but it might not be a good weekend for you because it's Manchester City v Manchester United. And Josh, every year I say, they've got no chance, Manchester United, in this game. But yet, they usually go there and win.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? I think United have actually won the last three at the Etihad, but I think this weekend in particular will be really telling for what Manchester United are about under Ralph Rangnick. I think he's had a pretty easy ride so far in terms of the fixtures that he's had, and I think there's always been a fear that having not capitalised on those fixtures, now the tough ones are coming around the corner, is going to be a big ask for them to try and get that fourth spot.
Jonathan, the Owen Hargreaves derby, are you looking forward to it?
Yes, but I am. Because, City, despite seeming to win pretty much every week, suddenly under a bit of pressure, and that makes it interesting, particularly given their record against United. United obviously aren't playing well at the minute, and the one thing that United were good at under Solskjaer was sitting deep against good teams and hitting them on the break. Now I think Ronaldo, curtailed that anyway, just because he slows everything down. But this is yet another test of Rangnick, and so far, United have only lost one of the last 20, so that's not a terrible record, albeit lots of those are draws. But I think there's a justifiable sense of not playing particularly well, that they don't have much fluency. It's pretty hard to see a direction for them. But this is the kind of game where under Solskjaer that they could pull out results and could lift some of that pressure. Yeah,
Ronaldo's 1 goal in 10. Josh, but I saw a stat the other day that Manchester United, since Rangnick's come in, have created more chances than anyone else. What does that tell us?
United have gone through like 2 stages under Rangnick. The first half of his time here was they didn't really create any chances, and Ronaldo was isolated in that respect. And now they're creating quite a lot of chances, and Ronaldo's not taking them. So, like you said, 1 goal, and he's got no assist in 10 matches in 2022, which is it's crazy, like a crazy run of form for someone of his high standards. Fred's actually played a direct hand in 4 times as many goals as Ronaldo in this calendar year. So I'm not sure who would have predicted at the start of 2022 that Fred would be more decisive in front of goal than Ronaldo. But yeah, it's strange. I think it's weird. I think in the last few games especially, I think he started to finally look his age. He's 37 now, but we've obviously been used to Ronaldo doing things that aren't normal for the last...
We can't all be 28, Josh.
That's true. But yeah, like he just finally looks his age. I don't think he's been helped in that respect by Cavani, who seems to pick and choose when he's fit to play. Ronaldo's just played near enough 5 90-minute games in the space of 14 days, and by the end of it, he did just look completely shattered. And I guess that hasn't helped in that respect. I think since the Middlesbrough game, Manchester United have had 25 clear-cut goal-scoring chances, and they've only scored 5 of them. So Ronaldo's to blame for some of that, but also some of the other forwards aren't performing too well either. All of Ronaldo's stats are pretty much down compared to before Rangnick to now. Dribbles per game, key passes per game, shots per game, they're all down. He's getting more touches in the opposition box, which is what you'd want from Ronaldo at this stage in his career, but his conversion rate has dropped from 20.7% before Rangnick to just 5.7% under him. So yeah, he's not taking the chances. He looks tired, but that isn't... Rangnick doesn't have the freedom to rotate because they let Martial go in January. As I said, Cavani's injured pretty much all the time now, but that just points to a wider problem that United have entered the business stage of a really important season with a strike force of a combined age of over 70. And then if you look before at the striker they signed before Cavani, it was Agallo, who was also the wrong side of 30. So these are wider issues at Manchester United, but yeah, it's not helping Ronaldo either.
Some serious ageism going on this podcast today, Josh. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
To be fair to United and to be fair to Rangnick, yes, having Ronaldo and Cavani as your only 2 strikers was problematic, but they couldn't realistically have anticipated the Greenwood situation, and he's somebody I
Yeah.
think would have played at centre forward. And then Rashford's been. I mean, I know he's probably better coming in off the left, but he could have played through the middle as an extra option. So, I think. I don't think it's a good thing to have two players of that age in the squad at the same time. But I think that there are other circumstances you can't. But in this instance, you can't really blame the club for.
I think Josh has got some comparison ratings whilst we talk about City's wobble. It feels a bit weird to call it a wobble, Jonathan, because I think just because they lost to Spurs, is that really a wobble? But it's not quite clicking as it was. They're lucky to get through the Everton game and come out with 3 points.
Really? I mean, so of the last 16 games, they've won 14, drawn 1, lost 1.
I did say it was harsh to call it a wobble.
The game before that was against Leipzig when they were already through, and which they lost, and they won the 7 before that. So, of the last 23 games that have had something riding on them, they've won 21 and drawn 1. I mean, that's the kind of wobble I dream of.
Oh, me too. I'd love it to wobble like that. And
even against Everton, sure they got away with the penalty, but the XG was 1.93 to 0.77 in their favour. Even against Spurs, they won the XG 2.32 to 2. So the last league game, certainly, where they lost the XG was that game when they lost to Brighton, the penultimate game of last season, when the title was won and they were resting players out of the Champions League final. So if you win in the XG every week and you're only dropping 5 points in 16 games, I don't really think that's a problem.
For Man City to have, I think they've won 15 of their last 17 in the Premier League, to have had that run and to have somehow conceded ground in the title race, I think just shows how good both these two teams are, that they're relentless and that if they don't win just one game, it seems like an absolute disaster, but it's far from that. But I do think that there has been a drop-off in aspects of City's play, and I think that's really been the case since the 6-3 win over Leicester on Boxing Day, and maybe there was more in that game than first met the eye at the time. They were obviously 4-0 up, and then it went to 4-3 at one stage. They obviously still won that game, but in the very next game, Guardiola completely put the handbrake on City in the 1-0 win over Brentford. They pretty much killed any sort of chance of it being an entertaining game from the first minute. I mean, it was pretty much as comfortable 1-0 win as you will ever see. But they've not really recaptured the same sort of attacking magic going forward ever since then. They didn't even have a shot on target until the hour mark against Peterborough in midweek, who are bottom of the Championship. And that drop-off is actually reflected in our WhoScored ratings as well. So we've compared the player ratings from their last 7 league games in 2021 to the first 7 league games of 2022. And the only player that's actually come out of that with a better WhoScored rating is João Cancelo, who's obviously so instrumental to the way they play. But every other player has suffered a decrease in some form. The biggest drop-off is from the forwards, which is, it surprised me that Sterling and Riyad Mahrez have actually suffered huge drop-offs, which I'll come on to in a second. But in general, it's the defenders or the defensive-minded players that have suffered the smallest drop-off, if you want to. And but yeah, so that feeds into the idea that City is still winning matches, but it's not been quite as easy, that the defenders are having to do a bit more work. But yeah, I was quite surprised with Sterling and Mahrez. For some reason, I thought they were just scoring goals every now and then, pretty much every week, but I guess it's been spread in different competitions. Sterling was flying up until that Leicester game, and I believe he scored in that game as well. But since then, he's only scored in 1 of 7 in 2022, which surprised me. That was a hat-trick against Norwich, to be fair, but yeah, it has sort of fallen off a little bit there. And Mahrez, his last 4 goals have been penalties, which is quite impressive for a Manchester City player to be good at penalties. So I guess that's not too bad. But yeah, his last goal from open play actually came in December in the league. That is, he obviously scored in midweek. And on Sterling, I know Sam Boswell from BetVictor might bring up some odds on him a bit later on in the show. But he's actually faced Manchester United 23 times in his career and he's never scored, which I think is probably the weirdest record of that an individual has against a particular opponent. I think I would back myself to score 1 goal in that time, just poking a loose ball. If I played 23 times against Manchester United for Manchester City as a forward, I think I'd back myself to score 1 goal, especially if Man United have been awful in some of those games as well.
Jonathan, how many would you score?
I mean, I'd be getting taken off to like 90 seconds of each game as they realise this lumbering 40-odd-year-old has somehow snuck on the pitch again.
Not as confident as Josh then. You're very confident, Josh, today. I don't know what's happened to you since you've turned 28. There's some
newfound
confidence has come in. Honestly, Jack Grealish is back, scoring a lovely goal against Peterborough in the FA Cup, but he needs to probably start doing that a little bit more in the Premier League. Incidentally, what did you make of Pep's comments about stats midweek? I actually really enjoyed them. I thought that everything he said was true, although that does kind of go against this podcast a little bit.
Both the question and the answer were slightly oversimplifying the case. So I think stats you have to look at in context. Stats very rarely have a meaning in themselves. You have to sort of interpret them. And we're clearly much more sophisticated than this now. But when stats first began to be widely distributed, people got very excited. I'm talking 15, 20 years ago. People got very excited by possession, as if possession was, if you had 60% possession, it means you controlled the game, you dominated the game. And now I think we understand that if you have 60% possession, it just means you have a lot of the ball. It doesn't tell you necessarily what you do with it. And the opposition could actually be controlling you by making you have the ball in your own half. And I think we do have a much more nuanced understanding of them now. So, stats only tell you things if you place them in the correct context. But I don't think that's a particularly new revelation. I think that's always been true. And I think it is true that if you purely look at attacking players in terms of goals and assists, then that is a pretty blunt instrument, that there is a lot more going on. It all depends on the style of the side you're playing in.
In this revisit of Grealish and Sancho, Josh, it's fair to say neither player has really hit the heights that we expected yet. I mean, it's early days. We've seen before with Pep players that players don't often hit the ground running in the first season, and I think there's probably mitigating circumstances for Sancho at Manchester United because they've largely been a mess. But these are two fantastic footballers who we want to see more from.
What I find most disappointing about whenever I watch Manchester City play and Grealish is playing, I just find it so boring when Grealish is on the ball, which is something that you'd never associate him with. I think it seems weird now that it was only in the summer that he was drawing comparisons with Paul Gascoigne with the way he played and his general character. And I think he probably still is a bit like Paul Gascoigne off the pitch, but we're not really seeing that side of him on the pitch. And I think that's whether that's a confidence thing or he's under instruction to play that way. I would hope that it's a confidence thing, because if he is being told to play well within himself in that sort of way, then I think that would be quite sad of his talents. And obviously no player decides their price tag. Well, maybe Ronaldo probably would, but no player decides what they're worth, sort of thing. And so that's not really Grealish's fault that they paid 100 million for him. But I think to pay 100 million for a player that at this moment in time doesn't improve your team, I think that should be open to criticism, regardless of whether Pep agrees with that or not. But yeah, I just think from Grealish, you just want you want him to be happy and expressive on the ball. That's when he's at his best. That's what he was so good at for Villa. And we're just not really seeing that at all at the moment for City. And then for Sancho, I think it was interesting. I think last time when they last played in November, neither Grealish or Sancho even started the game. And that might well be the case for at least one of them. I wouldn't be surprised. Like, Grealish hasn't been really starting for City in the meaningful games recently. Sancho's come on as late, and I think Jonathan's made good points throughout the season that it was perhaps no surprise that Sancho wasn't playing particularly well under Solskjaer when the football was pretty chaotic, and there have been noticeable improvements under a more structured coach like Rangnick. But yeah, Sancho is coming good now, which is good to see. Before it was just like flashes of skills and stuff, but now he's really putting his mark on that United front three. And it would also be a great stage for him to really announce himself against the club that he started at. Well, not started at, but came through before he left to Germany.
I've said it as a compliment about Manchester City before, that they're quite robotic, but it's meant as a compliment. I just don't think that suits Jack Grealish at all. He's an off-the-cuff player, needs a bit of freedom, and it's not structured at City. I don't even know what I'm trying to say here. It's not structured at City, but I just think the way they play doesn't really suit him. I think if he was playing for Liverpool, for example, I think you'd just see a completely different player, more of the player you saw at Aston Villa. But there's still time for him to get it right, and I hope that he does. Now, I'd imagine Grealish and Sancho aren't in the combined 11, Jonathan. Would you see any Manchester United player getting in the combined 11? I can think of two that potentially may get in.
Not for me, no. 11
No.
City players. Well, probably
11.
about 16 or 17 City players.
Not even anyone on the bit. Not even a sub-goalkeeper.
I mean, okay, yeah. Maybe De Gea was your subkeeper, yeah, to be fair.
Yeah, that's probably it, though.
But, I mean, you're struggling beyond that, just because City works so well as a unit.
Yeah.
So in the same way that I think they, if you're somebody who gets worked up by individual prizes, City maybe get overlooked a bit in them, but because no one player really stands out. But at the same time, they have no obvious weakness. So you take the 11 or you take the squad, and which United player would get into that? It's really hard to see any of them. Maybe Sancho. Maybe Sancho is the closest.
Yeah, he'd suit Manchester City quite well, and he'd probably do a lot
Well,
better than Manchester City.
I think I made this point earlier in the season that there was a sense that United and City had signed the wrong players. That if Grealish and Sancho had been the other way around, they both have benefited, because Sancho prefers that more structured system, prefers enacting specific instructions, and struggled a bit with the need to improvise that you suddenly thrust into United. Whereas Grealish, I think, hasn't yet assimilated those instructions and would like a slightly more off-the-cuff style.
Yeah, I think he was pretty close to joining Manchester United the summer before, or at least it was on the cards at one point. I'm going to say, I don't agree with it. I think WhoScored might have picked 2 Manchester United players.
Pogba, they would stick in because they always overrate Pogba.
I think it's De Gea and Fernandes.
It is. You got one of them right. So
only one.
Yeah. Not bad though. Yeah. So as both teams like to rotate quite a lot, particularly Man City, we've decided to base this combined 11 and just from starts alone. And because we've got statistics for every game they've played in all competitions, we've done it based on that as well. Everyone would expect, City do dominate. But as you guessed, Dan, there are 2 United players. De Gea is the first one. I think he obviously has returned to his best this season, but I think would be a pretty disastrous fit in a Guardiola side. So Guardiola's not having this team at all. But yeah, so we've got David De Gea is the first one. Then we've actually got Diego Dallo at right back. He's the second one. Ruben Diaz and John Stones at centre back. Stones just gets in ahead of Laporte. Cancelo's at left back. And then we've got a midfield 3 of De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva and Ilkay Gundogan. So Rodri just misses out to Gundogan there. And in the front 3 is Mahrez, Foden and Sterling in attack. So no Ronaldo, no Fernandes, no Varane, no Sancho and no Grealish.
Yeah, not too many surprises. Rodri not being in is a bit of a surprise, because I went on Premier League TV a month or so ago and was absolutely raving about him, saying he's arguably City's player of the season, and he doesn't even make the combined 11. So thanks for that, Josh.
He is really highly rated. If it did include substitute appearances, then he would be in. But it's just that Gundogan hasn't actually started that many games, but when he has, he's scored quite a lot of goals. Okay. So yeah, he just gets in ahead of Rodri, even though the roles are pretty different for him.
And I agree with you. Rodri's had a great season, but he didn't have a good game at all against Spurs.
No.
That's this is one of the things I think stats find quite difficult to pick up. But Kane was dropping into his space, and he just wasn't there. That should have been his job, and somehow he went missing. So I don't quite know what went wrong for him there.
Everyone has an after, I suppose, so we'll let him off for one game only. We've got a bet builder and some bookings. Bingo.
Oh, no, just...
I did my little song and everything. What's the bet builder then, Josh?
So we've got 3 parts to it. The first leg is for Paul Pogba to be carded. He will make a very rare outing in a Manchester derby this weekend. He's bizarrely only played in 6 of a possible 15 against Manchester City since returning to United. But he's fine. He's fine now. He's fine, ready to play. A couple of those are actually through suspension, fittingly. But yeah, he's committing the most fouls per 90 of any other player in the Premier League this season. And he's been booked 7 times in 15 domestic games this season for Manchester United. Can see him being drawn into a lot of fouls with City's midfielders buzzing around him. So Pogba to be carded the first leg, and then we've gone for Harry Maguire again to be carded. Obviously, he's a favourite for our bet builders. But there's always reasoning behind it. He's under a lot of pressure this season, and City is not an opponent he likes to face often. He's been carded 9 times against them in his career, which is at least 4 more than any other team he's faced. 9 bookings against 1 opponent is quite impressive. And then closing off the treble was Bernardo Silva to score any time. I think if Man City go on to win the league, he'll probably be in the running for player of the season. Might even be in the conversation for goal of the season as well. He scored in 3 of his last 6 appearances against United. Scored in the reverse fixture, and has only scored more against Watford and Burnley of English opponents in his career. So that's Paul Pogba to be carded, Harry Maguire to be carded, and Bernardo Silva to score any time. This was already 34-1, which is already miles in front of the competition in terms of other bookies. And BetVictor have boosted that even further to 45-1. So that's a huge price on Pogba to be carded, Maguire to be carded, and Silva to score anytime.
Yeah, but a few strikes against your name today, Josh. The ageism that we've already discussed, and there was absolutely no need to bring up that goal against Villa. Absolutely no need at all. Completely unnecessary. But what's Who Scored's prediction?
We've gone for 2-1 to Manchester City.
2-1 to City. Jonathan?
2-0 to City.
I've gone for a wild 3-2 to Manchester City. When you're doing as well as I can, you can afford to chuck a few of these and say, yeah, I've gone for 3-2 to Manchester City. We've just gone through the bet builder, but let's catch up with Sam Boswell from BetVictor to see what other odds are floating around that game. Sam, welcome back after playing hooky last week. How are you?
Yeah, apologies. I was on a horse racing gallops in the lead up to Cheltenham. Obviously, it's a very exciting time for anyone that likes their racing. So keep your eyes peeled over at BetVictor. We'll have some great footage for people to enjoy in the lead up to the Cheltenham Festival. But football, yeah, let's get stuck in. What a big game we've got this weekend.
Yeah, the Manchester Derby. And I say this every single year that United have got no chance, and then usually they go there and win. What's BetVictor saying?
This year, you'll be well rewarded if United do pull off the shock of a win over near neighbour City. They're 7-1 to get the win, 19-5 the draw, 4-11 the home side, which does look a little bit skinny in the context of United tending to turn up to these fixtures. Just a league update: City 1-4 to get the job done, Liverpool 11-4, and then you can name your price on United. Not going to be winning the league either this year, sadly, for their fans. But in this individual game, some bet boost we should mention. Raheem Sterling to score any time, been boosted to 29-20, having a great season so far. Raheem. Kevin De Bruyne to score from outside the box has been boosted to 6-1. Manchester United to score a penalty 7-1 from 6-1. But this game, I do think you look through the stats and everything. I find it a really tough one to call, but I'm hoping we'll see an entertaining game. I'm expecting to see plenty of interest around our bet builders, people getting stuck into those, as well as the stats market as well, shots on target, that kind of thing. Certainly a market people like to get stuck into. I'm surprised to see Ronaldo's as big as 1-2 for a shot on target. But then again, this is the same Manchester United side that couldn't break down Watford the other week. Potentially that's why he's a price.
Kevin De Bruyne to have lots of shots on target, would be my tip. David De Gea is very busy at the best of times, let alone coming up against Manchester City. So that would be my tip if anyone cares at all. Sam, thanks ever so much for joining us. We'll chat again next week.
No problem. Look forward to it.
Before we head into the just a minute section, some big news this week that Marcelo Bielsa has left Leeds United. Not a massive surprise the way things have been going this season, but a sad day for Leeds fans because the man has simply reinvented them. Jonathan? I mean, like I say, it's not really a surprise, but he's quite sad because he has done a very, very good job there.
They have the second lowest wage bill in the Premier League still. So even though they spent a fair bit on transfers, the wages have been kept very low. And if you have the second lowest wage bill and you then lose half a dozen players, most of the season they've been without significant players. And I think Bamford, Phillips, recently Cooper and Llorente, the most significant of them, then it's really, really difficult. I think the sense was that Bielsa was going to leave in the summer anyway. So when things were going as badly wrong as they have been in the last couple of months, it's very hard. If he's leaving in the summer, it's very hard to see a long-term upside. I can see why you would make the sacrifice now and hope that a new manager and new ideas can just refresh people and get enough points to stay in the Premier League. But what he's done with Leeds, taking them back to the Premier League after 17 years, changing the culture of the club. I think the fact he's a great rarity in modern football and that he's somebody of profound integrity who seems to have had an impact directly and indirectly on the lives of hundreds of Leeds fans. It is of course sad to see him go.
Big bucket to fill for Jesse Marsch. I don't know much about him at all, Jonathan, but their defending last week was shambolic against Spurs. It's not an easy gig to walk into, and that they are in serious trouble. Yeah,
they are. And the worry would be that team's been overperforming. I mean, maybe not the last couple of months, but until then, have been overperforming under Bielsa. He'd taken sort of mid-table Championship players and made them look like mid-table Premier League players. And he'd done that by having them play his very idiosyncratic man-to-man pressing system. Now, that had begun to cause problems because teams had realised that if it's man-to-man, you can manipulate them in various ways. And I think that was one of the factors that made things begin to go wrong this season, as well as the injuries. But if you've got a new manager coming in, I mean, Jesse Marsch presses high, but he presses only. And so that is a different system. And it's not just that players have to suddenly pick up a new system 2/3 of the way through the season. It's that we don't know those players can do that. A lot of those players, their success has come in a totally different system. And that system alone has been the thing that's elevated them. So I think that would be a concern. But then, given how badly things are going, maybe any change works. And I was talking to Neda Manua about this, and he was saying that he thinks that a lot of those players had begun to get frustrated with the strictness of the man-to-man system, that they felt they were getting dragged out of position, and their instinct will be to cover zonally, and that they will now be able to follow their instincts rather than just doing what Bielsa told them to do, and that may be beneficial. So I think it's a concern, but it's one of those things that could work for them or it could work against them.
I think they're in massive, massive trouble. I think he's made a lot of those players way better than they actually are, gone past their ceiling. But I've been wrong about lots of things before, so fully expect Leeds to stay up. Let's do the just a minute section now then. It's Leicester v Leeds for you first, Jonathan. The Jermaine Beckford derby. He played for both.
Gary McAllister was the man in my head, but...
Oh, very nice.
I
love the way you're getting into this, Jonathan. It's taken about me 6 months to get you there, but you love it, thriving in this section now.
I'm just old. Like, I just remember things from the 80s better than I remember things from last week. Yeah, so I mean, we've sort of touched on a lot of it there, but Leeds clearly defensively have been dreadful recently. They've let in 40 goals in the last 12 league games, and clearly you can't be having to score 3.5, 4 goals a game just to get a point. They're only 2 points above relegation zone, and even more worrying than that, and even more worrying than the fact that the trajectory is so clearly downward. They've played 2 games more than Burnley. Leicester, that draw against West Ham, a win at Burnley, although they came out of the side of the defeated Wolves, I think that sort of sense a sort of righting of the ship there, that there was talk of Brendan Rodgers possibly facing the sack, which I think would have been very harsh. But things probably are more stable. Keeper Phillips Bamford still out. Leicester still got loads of problems injury-wise. Castagna, Evans, Justin, Fofana, Bertrand, there's Dagdo, Pereira. They drew 1-1 early in the season, but I think Leicester will win this 2-1.
I've gone for 1-1. Who scored?
2-1 to Leicester for this one.
2-1 to Leicester. Josh, up for you is Villa v Southampton, the Stuart Taylor derby. You can always rely on it. He's a reliable backup goalkeeper to have played for 2 teams.
Steven Gerrard importantly managed to stem a run of back-to-back defeats in the Premier League with a 2-0 win away to Brighton last weekend. Ollie Watkins and Danny Ings were surprisingly started both in attack last weekend, with Buendia dropping to the bench. Gerrard finally recognised the space behind Villa's fullbacks was causing them too many problems, and he instructed them to stay back as fullbacks against Brighton. That certainly helped neutralise Brighton's play down the wings, and Gerrard may well go unchanged against Southampton this weekend. That, though, may raise issues of how he gets the likes of Buendia and Leon Bailey into the team moving forward. Ralph Hasenhüttl made wholesale changes from the side that beat Norwich last Friday to the side that beat West Ham in the FA Cup on Wednesday. Carl Walker-Peters and James Ward-Prowse were the only players to keep their places in the team, and they both combined or scored in that win over the Hammers. Keeping his players fresh where possible will be key to Southampton's pursuit of a top 10 finish, who I've been really impressed with in the last few weeks. Southampton's season has really, though, been built on their terrific home form. They've only lost once at St Mary's all season. They've recently taken points from away to Tottenham and Manchester United, and are unbeaten in their last 6 at Villa Park since last suffering defeat in 2004. I think, though, just with the FA Cup in the middle of that, I think they might possibly suffer from a bit of fatigue. So we've gone for a 1-1 draw. I think if they had a full week, though, I'd have backed Southampton. Sorry, Dan.
I mean, the fact that Villa haven't beat Southampton and Villa Park since 2004, there's all kinds of weird records like that. It must happen to every club, but it feels like Villa are the wrong end of these records all the time. I can tell you who scored that day as well, Carlton Cole.
Yeah, there's another goal scorer as well.
Yeah. So name the other one. The Rice
Oh,
Bizarre.
sorry.
Yeah. That's okay. No, it's all right. Don't test me on Villa, Josh. I've got that in the bag. So you're 1-1. Jonathan, what are you?
Also 1-1.
1-1, and I have gone for 2-2. Your next game, Jonathan, to preview is Burnley v Chelsea. I'm going with some serious backup goalkeeper vibes today. I think Rob Green played for Burnley, didn't they?
Right, okay.
He played for Chelsea. Rob Green?
Frank Sinclair was the man in my head. But
Nice.
But Burnley, after the FA Cup defeat, they had only lost 1 in 7 after that sort of COVID-enforced midwinter break before losing to Leicester earlier this week. bit unlucky in that game, conceded 2 late goals, probably had the better of it, certainly in terms of possession for most of that. I think there is hope there with Weghorst having fitted in so quickly. He already looks a much more mobile player than Chris Wood, not necessarily a better player, but certainly more mobile. And that seems to work well, I think, with Cornet. They're only a point of Everton, they're only 2 points behind Leeds. So having looked not quite dead and buried, but in major trouble in December, I think they are improving. Chelsea won 6 in a row before the Carabao Cup final defeat, obviously played well in that, losing on penalties. Weren't especially impressive in just beating Luton in the Cup last night. And they've obviously got the whole issue with Abramovich and the future ownership of the club to worry about. It was 1-1 at Stamford Bridge between these early in the season, but I think Chelsea should have enough here to win 1-0.
I've gone for 1-1 again. Josh?
2-1 to Chelsea.
2-1 to Chelsea. You're now going to do Newcastle v Brighton. I don't really have a player, but I've got a manager, the Chris Hughton derby.
Jeff Clark.
Dan Burn.
Yeah, big Jeff. You know we don't like doing current players unless we absolutely have to, Josh.
It's typical now that Newcastle's midfield is performing so well that a player that they signed who many thought was too good for them can't even get in the team. Bruno Guimaraes has barely stepped foot on the pitch, but Newcastle are now on their best unbeaten run in the Premier League in over a decade. 2-0 win away to Brentford last weekend means they're now unbeaten in 7 and one of only 2 teams that are yet to suffer defeat in 2022. Beating relegation was the aim for Eddie Howe when he took over, but now they could actually break the top 10. I think he's obviously been helped with a boatload of cash, but I think Eddie Howe's done really well to answer some of the questions that were posed about him and how he got teams to defend. West Ham. Newcastle have only conceded 3 goals in the league in this calendar year, which is the fewest. So that's quite impressive. And they're up against Brighton this weekend, who have lost 3 in a row without even scoring. They've suffered as many defeats in their last 3 as the previous 20 combined. So Graham Potter's got to change something to try and get them back on track. They always seem to have these runs where they go on a long, really impressive run, and then that follows with a long, terrible run. So yeah, this will obviously have extra significance for Dan Burn. As I said, he moved from Brighton to Newcastle in January and has played a pretty key role in helping them turn their defensive fortunes around. And we're going to back them to get a 1-0 win here.
I've gone for 2-1 to Newcastle. Jonathan?
2-0 to Newcastle.
2-0 to Newcastle. Brighton on the way down, just like I predicted at the start of the season. Norwich v Brentford for you next, Jonathan. It's going to have to be Sergi Canos. That's all I can do. I've got nothing else.
Another former Sunderland player, Michael Turner.
Michael Turner, I remember him.
Yeah.
Big donkey centre-half, yeah.
Yeah, that was him. Yeah. Yeah, Norwich, they're pretty much gone, haven't they? They're 5 points adrift, and they've played 2 games more than Everton in fourth bottom. There had been an improvement, I think, after Dean Smith took over. Their recent run of games has been 1-3, drawn 1, lost 4 in that order. To be fair, the defeats have come 2 of them against Liverpool, 1 against City, and 1 against Southampton. So they have been in hard games. So maybe there is still a glimmer of hope, but not a huge amount. Brentford sinking fast, 8 defeats and drawn in the last 9. Game against Newcastle on Saturday was really decided by that early red card to Josh Silva, who's obviously suspended for this. The hope that came out of that game for them was partly Eriksson coming on in the second half, and he may give them a bit of creativity. But I think even more than that, Ivan Toney coming on after him, back from injury. They've only scored 5 goals in that 9-game run. 3 of those have been scored by Toney, and his absence is clearly a big problem. I don't really fancy either of them here, so 1-1.
We've gone for 1-0 to Norwich.
And I've gone for 2-0 to Dean Smith's Norwich. Your final game to preview is Wolves v Palace. And I tell you what, I am channeling the backup goalkeepers here, the Wayne Hennessy derby.
Back-to-back defeats for Wolves has really put the brakes on their unlikely push for fourth. Nelson Semedo is their only injury concern headed into the weekend, and we could even see a first start in 12 months for Pedro Neto. Palace continue to prove difficult to beat, but they're a team that's struggling to get wins themselves. Their only defeat in the last 5 was against Chelsea, but they've only won once in that time. The only changes expected from Patrick Vieira are in attack, where he likes to change on a game-by-game basis. Wolves have won this fixture 3 times in a row, and they haven't conceded in any of those, so we're going to back a 1-0 win for them here.
Tell you what, that was about under 30 seconds. That was, Josh. You didn't fancy having a go at previewing that one, did you? Not
interested in that one.
Didn't need the minute. I've gone for 2-0 to Wolves. I had a Wolves fan have a go at me on Twitter last week because I always predict Wolves to lose 1-0. Jonathan?
2-1 to Wolves.
2-1 to Wolves. Your final game, Jonathan, is Watford v Arsenal, and he's only gone and done it again. The Manuel Almunia derby.
Yeah.
Come on.
Watford have only won one of the last 15, and yet somehow there's only 3 points from safety, which doesn't make a huge amount of sense. Suggests how many points they picked up in the first part of the season before it all went wrong. Of the last three, though, they've taken 4 points and they've kept 2 clean sheets in that time, which is something they hadn't done in the Premier League in their previous 5 managers. So you can see already that Roy Hodgson is having an effect at one end of the pitch. They've only scored 2 goals in the last 7, which is, I would say, a concern. In the league, Arsenal have won 7 of the last 9, and they drew with Burnley, and they lost to City in a game in which they were a little bit unlucky. They've scored in all of those, apart from the Burnley game, which finished 0-0. 2 points behind United in the race for 4th, but they do have 3 games in hand, so they're very well placed. The problem you still have with them is, can they beat top-class opponents? But that doesn't really matter here because they're playing Watford. Tomiyasu's out and Kulu's out. There's a doubt over Ismail Assar, who obviously, if he is out, that would be a major blow to Watford's creativity. So I'm going to say Arsenal to win 2-0.
Gone Watford 1, Arsenal 3. Josh, the WhoScored guys?
Same as Jonathan, 2-0 to Arsenal.
2-0. Let's do it. Let's talk about last week's predictions, Josh. Talk to me, please.
You've extended your lead at the top. Incredibly, you've got four correct scores bang on. Again, that's the third time you've done that this season. So you've got 15 points in total. Your lead is now, so you're on 175 points for the season. WhoScored on 163 and Jonathan has 151. So you've extended your gap, 12 points clear of second place.
A long way back for you there, Jonathan. A long way back.
Yeah, well, it's not my fault that football keeps being wrong.
I had a feeling I'd be in for a good week last week. I liked the look of my predictions last week. I did them and I thought they're good. I don't like them as much this week, but last week I did look at them and think there's a few there that have got a chance, and there was a few differentials. So yeah, strong week. Enjoying the predictions league. Enjoy anything that I'm doing well in. Obviously not fantasy football and the like, because I'm not doing well at anything else. But predictions league.
Go on. Tell us more about your fantasy football team.
No. I know you don't want to hear it, Jonathan. Not having a great time. My dad's beating me, which is really frustrating me. He's top of the league. I've got 100 points on me. I'm going to find it very difficult to pull that back. We've got a Saturday 3 p.m. treble with BetVictor, Josh.
You went for Norwich to win 0 versus Brentford. That's happened in 3 of the last 4 meetings between the two sides. Brentford just haven't scored in 3 of their last 4 anyway, headed into this game. Jonathan, you went for Newcastle to win 0 against Brighton. I think that was it.
Yeah.
So Newcastle have conceded the fewest goals in 2022, and Brighton haven't scored in 3 straight games. And WhoScored have just completed a 0 treble. We've gone for Wolves to win 0 against Palace. As I said, Wolves have won their last 3 home games 0 against Palace, and only once in the last 8 matches between the two have both teams scored. So that's Wolves to win 0 against Palace, Newcastle to win 0 against Brighton, and Norwich to win 0 against Brentford. That hasn't been boosted, but that's 79-1 for that treble, which is already, again, by far and away the industry best price. 79-1 for those 3.
That is high. Premier League February team of the month, Josh. Please enlighten us.
You'll be pleased to know it's a 4-4-2 formation, your favourite formation. So starting off in goal, we've got Jordan Pickford. February was a mixed bag for Everton, but Pickford ended up making the second most saves in the division. Very busy for him. Into defence, we've got Kyle Walker-Peters at right back. Fullbacks really benefit from the way Southampton play, and Walker-Peters took full advantage. He was second for dribbles in the league, and he also closed off the month with back-to-back WhoScored Man of the Match awards. So the centre-back pairing is all Liverpool. We've got Joel Matip and Virgil van Dijk. Both of them got on the score sheet in February in the league. And then the left back, who always seems to be in the teams, is João Cancelo. He just is a pretty incredible player. And then moving into the midfield, we've got Mo Salah on the right. Again, another mainstay in these sort of teams. He played a direct hand in 4 goals and 3 starts in February, and became the first player in the league this season to reach double figures for goals and assists. And then we've got Ward-Prowse in midfield with Josh Brownhill of Burnley. Not someone that you often talk about in these sort of 11s, but he's had a great spell with Burnley. Ward-Prowse obviously going from strength to strength again at Southampton. And on the left is Luis Diaz, who's obviously made a great start to his Liverpool career. We'll talk about him shortly. He got his first goal for Liverpool last month, had 12 shots in total, ranked highly for both dribbles and key passes, very effective player. And then the front 2 is Harry Kane and Sadio Mane. Mane is actually our player of the month. He obviously came back from AFCON as a winner, and that's given him a spring in his step. So he's also done well playing in a new set, like a central role for Liverpool with Diaz on the left, and Kane obviously delivered a brilliant performance against Manchester City, back to his very best. So yeah, it's Pickford, Walker-Peters, Matip and Van Dijk, Cancelo, Mo Salah, Ward-Prowse, Josh Brownhill, Luis Diaz, and then Kane and Mane.
Good team, that. Josh Brownhill wouldn't mind playing in that team, I don't think.
He wouldn't.
He'd have an absolutely lovely time in central midfield with all those players. Right, Liverpool v West Ham then. Oh, God, I need a derby.
Mascherano?
Joe Cole.
Mascherano, Joe Cole, they're all there. I was desperately trying to think of a backup goalkeeper. Oh, I've got one, but he still plays for Liverpool, so it doesn't really work. The Adrian derby. We like the backup goalkeepers today. But yeah, your two shouts were better. Josh has just touched on him there, Jonathan. Diaz. Incredible player, early doors, settled in like he's been at Liverpool all his life, in the team of the month for WhoScored, which I'm sure means an awful lot to him. He's offered something different, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. I think we talked about it before. They desperately needed to strengthen that front line, just because that traditional three were they all either have or will turn 30 this season, and it's a very bad thing to have a team aging together. Bringing in Diogo Jota clearly was the start of that, although he missed a lot last season with injury. But I think the incredible thing, and it's true of Jota as well, actually, is that Liverpool's system, the way they press, is you would assume it'd be difficult to pick up, because you have to learn the patterns, you have to learn when to go, you have to learn specific opponents, and yet Jota and Diaz seem to have picked up incredibly quickly. Now, I don't know if that's testament to Liverpool's scouting, and to be fair, Liverpool, they don't buy many duds. So presumably it is. But I think getting him in when they did, probably 6 months before they intended to bring him in, their hand was forced a bit by Spurs' interest. I think that's been hugely beneficial to them, that they can now perm 3 from 5. And with Firmino injured, that's been hugely beneficial. But he looks incredibly hardworking, quick, is fit at the pressing, but he's also just very, very skillful. I mean, there was a moment coming back up final when he just sort of flicked the ball, I can't remember whose head it was, he flicked it over, but flicked the ball over the Chelsea player's head and went on the other side. And you just sort of thought, we've become so inured to that kind of skill. But like 10 years ago, we'd have been raving about that. And it's almost passed without notice. But yeah, he looks, I mean, it's obviously early still, but he looks a brilliant player.
Yeah, I thought he was a joke in the Carabao Cup final Sunday. I thought he was so good. Must be quite interesting for Liverpool fans, because they don't buy loads of players, Josh, but when they do, it's always incredibly well thought out, and they just seem to always fit in.
It's funny how things work out, really, because as Jonathan said, this wasn't a signing that was a priority at all for them in January, but it was forced on them because of Tottenham. And I think David Moyes has said recently that they were close to signing him. But it's weird that signing could now potentially propel them to the league title if they can continue to catch Manchester City, because obviously it gives them a new option. And if you just look at his stats over his first 3 league games for Liverpool, he's had 4 shots in each game against Leeds, Norwich and Leicester. He's created 8 goal-scoring chances in that time. He's completed 11 dribbles. He's won 5 fouls. He's committed 4 himself. He's making tackles. He's making interceptions. So he's doing everything that a Liverpool or a forward should do in a Jurgen Klopp system. He's doing it all, and he's doing it straight away. He's actually the top-rated January signing across Europe's top 5 leagues. So he's done better than anyone else in Europe so far. And I always think it's, if you know that you're coming to the end of a cycle of a team and you've got players who are potentially on their way out, I think it's always good if you can get the replacement in first. I just think it makes things much easier. And obviously they've absolutely nailed it with Diaz, or so it seems at the moment, because obviously I guess it'll be Mane or Salah that will perhaps leave in the next 12 months. And with Diaz there already, they've got a ready-made replacement already firing.
Yeah, West Ham, Jonathan, felt a big win against Wolves last week. Excuse me, Mr. Wolves fan, I predicted you to lose 1-0 actually, and you lost 1-0, so I don't know why you're having a go at me on Twitter for. But yeah, big win for West Ham. Ruben Neves will not have liked the celebrations at the end of the game, and I probably thought they were a bit much. It was a big win though, and they're still in with a massive shout of top 4, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the squad and you still think they're incredibly reliant on Mikel Antonio, and it's very hard to give him time off. And were he to get injured, then that clearly would severely limit their striking options. But for now, they keep ticking over. I mean, their form's been a bit odd. West Ham. So it has been they were unbeaten in 5 before the cup game against Southampton this week. But they had lost the 2 before that. They won the 4 before that, and then before that they had a run of 5, which they lost 4 and drew 1. So they're still sort of their position is still largely dependent on points they banked early in the season. But yeah, certainly at home, you think they can beat anybody. They obviously have beaten Liverpool already this season, and I think that game was key. I mean, it's that game that led to that slightly dodgy run because Ogbonna got injured and he's obviously still out, and I think he's a huge loss to their defence. So yeah, the squad is clearly not as deep as that of the bigger clubs, but teams like Manchester United, Arsenal, Tottenham, you don't fully trust. And if West Ham keep on picking up points, particularly at home, then they could sneak fourth.
They do have Declan Rice as well, who's an absolutely sensational footballer. You wanted to talk about this, Josh, before we came on. My shout about West Ham last week, I said they'd win 1-0 and I said Souček would score. It happened. Unbelievable.
Did a bit of digging. I asked the kind folk of BetVictor to find out what that sort of price would have been before the game, and they said that Souček to score and West Ham to win 1-0 would have been priced around 55 to 60 to 1. So, and obviously you didn't get on that then, so that's a shame, isn't it?
It is a shame. I didn't get on it. I should get something. I said at the time, extra points if you get the goal scorer. That was a phenomenal shout. He hadn't scored for ages as well, so that was a big shout, but I didn't bet on it. So, yeah.
And it was his birthday as well, wasn't it?
And it was his birthday as well, Jonathan. I don't know. Was he 20? Was he younger than 28? Is he older than 28? I'm not sure. Probably about 28. I would say. I had to guess his age. I would say 28.
27,
nearly. Right, what predictions have we got for this one then? Jonathan, I'll come to you first.
3-1 for Liverpool.
Same for me. Josh?
Yeah, well, all of us have predicted 3-1, and we just thought we'd take a leaf out of your book then and get that price up as a correct score. And we've also thrown in Salah to score anytime here. He has nine career goals against West Ham, which makes them his joint favourite opponent. So Liverpool to win 3-1 and Salah to score anytime has been boosted from 12 to 1 to 16 to 1 this weekend for anyone that fancies following Dan's lead.
Oh, there's some good ones this week, isn't there? I might be making 3 bets with BetVictor so far. I like the look of all 3 of those. The final game we're going to look at today is Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football is back. It's Tottenham v Everton, the Lewis Hart derby. Is that right? Yes, that is right. Doubted myself for a second, but he did spend a little bit of time under Harry Redknapp at Spurs. Jonathan, Kane and Son absolutely flying together. A joy to watch at the moment. Kulusevski's come in as well. He's looked really, really good. I was surprised Juventus let him go because he was really good for them last season. But they've got a pretty strong forward line now, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. I mean, Lucas Moura, I think, is missing from this game, isn't he? Oh, he's certainly a doubt. But you sort of think, well, he wouldn't have started anyway because Kulusevski has started so well. And as you say, Kane and Son back to being as devastating together as they ever have been. And that's one of the, it's the classic thing when things start to go wrong for Tottenham. Harry Kane's got to play more in the box. Why is he dropping deep? One of his great strengths is he can drop deep. And you saw against City, the way he drops off and plays that ball around the corner for Son, it's really hard to defend that, the pace at which they do that. So the idea he should take that out of his game, to I don't know, maybe score 2 or 3 more goals a season, I think is a very strange one. And equally, if you look at the performance against City, certainly the last goal came from him making a run from a deep area. So that dropping off, when he's so comfortable doing it, I think he should be encouraged to. The thing you have to do then is get players running beyond him. But both Son and Kulusevski seem happy to do that.
You'd be shocked to learn. I completely agree with you, Jonathan, as I always do. Why would you ask someone to stop doing something that they're very, very good at? It makes no sense at all. Josh, form rankings?
Fittingly, both Harry Kane and Son are at the top of that. Kane's number 1 and Son's number 2. The timing's not great because obviously Tottenham were dumped out of the FA Cup by Middlesbrough in midweek. But this is the form rankings based on the Premier League. So Kane's 1 and Son's 2. And I think, like, as you said, Kulusevski's added like a real great dynamic to that front too, because I think it felt harsh that Lucas Moura dropped out of the team straight away, because I think on the balance of the whole season he's probably been one of Tottenham's best players, but I think from what we've seen of Kulusevski, you just realise what Lucas Moura lacked. I think he's only scored 19 goals in 120 league games for Tottenham, and Kulusevski's obviously already on 2. I think since the start of last season, Kulusevski is Tottenham's 8th top goal scorer in the Premier League with a whopping 2 goals. So there was obviously issues beyond. If you could, obviously everyone knows that Kane and Son are their main goal threats. So if you basically just let Lucas Moura have the ball more often than not and sort of starve them of possession, then you'll probably have some success. But with Kulusevski, he's obviously added a new dynamic. And I think we saw in the Leeds game, I think you saw a perfect example of Kulusevski's obviously a right footer that's playing on the left, and Son's both footed, but would prefer to be on his right. So with those two both coming inside, you allow the fullbacks all the room in the world to get forward. And I think you saw that against Leeds perfectly, especially for what Antonio Conte likes to do. You had Ryan Sessegnon coming down the left, and he whipped it in for Matt Doherty to score from the right. So that's two wing backs combining. So Kulusevski's is helping Son and Kane, and he's also helping the overall team balance, I guess, under Conte.
I'd say it also helps when you don't play Emerson Royale, because I still maintain he's absolutely awful. He's making Doherty look like one of the best right wing backs there's ever been, watching him play for Spurs last week against Leeds, although Leeds did a pretty good job of making Doherty look good as well. Jonathan, Everton's away record, it's the worst in the Premier League this season. They had the 4th best last season. I was going to say I've always thought they had a bad home record, but I guess they do have both, because that's why they're so down low in the table.
Yeah, but they've clearly been much better at home under Lampard. I mean, 1-2, albeit one of them in the cup, and then the game against City, where had that penalty been given and had they converted, they'd probably have got a 1-1 draw. That, although they lost the game fairly comfortably on XG, you just said was probably deserved on the way they played. I mean, Pickford made one really good double save in that game as well. So I don't think we should get too carried away by. I mean, look, it's City, so it's a different level of opponent anyway. But their 2 away performances under Lampard have been dismal. Now, I don't think that's a Lampard problem. I think that predates Lampard, certainly this season. But clearly, if they are going to get themselves out of this relegation fight, they do need to start picking up points away. And that'd be my concern about the way they've started under Lampard. That it does feel so far a very emotional reaction. It's to do with the fact that the home crowd at Goodison are being supportive in a way that they haven't been of previous managers, and there is this sort of sense of positivity at home. Whether structurally there's been significant improvements yet, I don't know. Whether you can expect them after 2 or 3 weeks, maybe that's unfair as well.
It feels like they just like him, Josh, because he's a bit more front foot than what they were getting under Benitez. I say a bit more front foot, quite a lot more front foot than it was under Benitez, and he didn't used to manage Liverpool.
It's weird with Everton, isn't it? Because last season they had the 4th best away record, and this season they're actually bottom of the Premier League, like on away point. They've only got 6 points from a possible 36 away from home. They haven't won since August, and they haven't kept any clean sheets away from home this season. It's strange. I don't know, because last season was the whole season was behind closed doors, wasn't it? Last season, was that right?
Except for the last game, there was like a percentage allowed in. Yeah. So I don't know whether that helped them, and now that there's obviously all fans are back, and now they're struggling. I don't know whether there's something in that, whether there's something fundamentally wrong with the characters of the players or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, it's weird. And they've still got to play Liverpool, Arsenal, Leicester, West Ham, and obviously Tottenham on Monday, all away from home. So it's not like they've had all of their hard away games already. They've lost at places where you would expect Everton to win, or certainly pick up points. So yeah, it's strange, and like their home form has been good, like Jonathan said, under Lampard, but still nothing's really changed away from home. Because you kind of think the home form and the home atmosphere might get Everton over the line, Jonathan, and get them to stay. Kind of think the same with Leeds, actually. But either one of them, they still could. You talk about them fixtures that Josh has just mentioned as well. Either one of them could go, and Everton are in just as much trouble as Leeds.
Well, both could go. I mean, my suspicion is it'll be Norwich, Watford, and Brentford.
Yeah.
But Tony and Eriksson could turn things around for Brentford. Brentford's home form isn't. I think they've lost 4 of the last 8 at home, but that includes games against the 2 Manchester clubs, Wolves, and then Newcastle on Saturday. Yeah, they're sending off. Obviously, changed everything after 11 minutes. So I'm not writing Brentford off, but they look the team in trouble. Burnley obviously have been improved, but are they improved enough? But I think it's certainly not impossible. They're both Everton and Leeds could go down. Both we don't quite know what to make of them. Leeds with a new manager and Everton. It's still very early, and while some things have improved, some things clearly haven't. But if they can win, say 70% of their home games between now and the end of the season, that will comfortably be enough, because they probably only need a dozen points to be fairly secure. And so that's only 4 home wins, isn't it? So it is you do think they're not that far away if a home form does pick up.
It's exciting, though. Exciting at the top, exciting at the bottom. We talk about home form being important, but only one manager or two managers in that relegation battle have got experience of a relegation battle in the Premier League, and that's Dean Smith and Roy Hodgson. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Everton and Leeds, they could seriously be in trouble. I don't want to upset their fans that may watch this podcast, but they could be in serious trouble. Predictions, Jonathan?
2-0 Tottenham.
I've gone 2-0 as well. Josh?
We've gone for 3-1 to Tottenham.
3-1 to Tottenham. Very good. That does us for this week's edition of the Edge of the Box podcast. Thanks ever so much for watching, and thanks to Josh and Jonathan for joining me as always. Really, really enjoyed it as always as well. Please subscribe to the podcast with your post notifications on, or subscribe to the channel. That makes more sense. That would really help us. We want to get those subscriber numbers up, so please help. There's about 50 million people follow WhoScored on Twitter. Why is this not translating into the podcast? Let's make it happen. Enjoy the football at the weekend. Have a good weekend as well. And yes, stay safe.